Not going to be a very detailed look. We're not going to tell a lot of stories because if we did that, we'd be here probably 3 or 4 hours. So this is strictly, where did the Greeks come from? How did they grow and develop over the years and get to where we are today in 2014? Our timeline begins in 1847 with the founding of Otterbein University. Oddly enough, there was no Greek life at that time. Founder and early president, the Reverend Louis Davis, was strongly opposed to what he then referred to as secret societies. This came largely from an anti-Masonic sentiment within the United Brethren Church, which was the church that founded us. According to Daniel Berger, author of the 1897 History of the Church of the United Brethren in Christ, quote, Louis Davis was opposed to secret organizations with an intensity that became a kind of morbid infatuation. He always had a watchful attitude over the attitude of the church and often opposed or supported other issues according to their supposed or possible bearing on this, to his mind, central issue. Now we have to take that with a grain of salt because 8 years previously the church itself had split over governance issues and the issue of secret societies. That quote was written by a member of the New Constitution Brethren, the group that allowed its members to join Masons and other secret societies. And quite frankly, I think that was a cheap shot at Louis Davis, who had been dead for several years and couldn't defend himself at that point. However, it's no secret that Davis did oppose these organizations. From the minutes of the Board of Trustees in June of 1857, quote, Resolved that we have heard with sorrow that some of the ministers, church members, and citizens of our place, having recently taken the preliminary steps to form themselves into a secret oath-bound society, and resolved further that we look upon all such organizations as in direct opposition to our common Christianity, the interests of Otterbein University, and the peace and harmony of our community, unquote. Now, regardless of whatever Davis would have wanted for the school, Otterbein University remained with the New Brethren, or New Constitution Brethren. This church merged eventually with the Evangelical Church in 1946 to become the Evangelical United Brethren, and then in 1968 with the Methodist Church to become the United Methodist Church, which is why we are a Methodist school today. But that's another program. Now, this did not mean that Otterbein was welcoming of the Greek life immediately after. Far from it. In 1907, Dr. Henry Garst wrote in his groundbreaking history of Otterbein University, quote, In the past 60 years, there have never been any secret societies or fraternities in Otterbein University, nor have they ever existed in any of the colleges founded by the United Brethren in Christ. While the opposition has been somewhat modified and rendered more discriminating, it is still widely prevalent. Many believe that the absence of fraternities accounts, in part at least, for the vigorous life, good work, and generally prosperous condition of the literary societies in Otterbein University. More on them later. Certainly, it is that the freedom of the university from these orders that has kept the university free also from the stupid follies, the well-nigh incredible cruelties and barbarities, and even fatal tragedies which are sometimes connected with the initiation ceremony of fraternities. Not exactly love talk here. Garst then goes on to quote several pages worth of academic studies about fraternities and then concludes with this, his own thought. Quote, Otterbein University, never having had fraternities, is not qualified except in a negative way to judge as to their influence, but it is interesting to note that this institution for the past 60 years has been remarkably free from the evils attributed to fraternities in the consensus, while there have been no lack of the good things attributed to them, which shows that they may be had without them, unquote. The next point in the timeline comes in 1851. That year, approximately 5 years after Otterbein's founding, a group of students led by Benjamin Russell Hanby founded the Otterbein Lyceum. It began as a book club, its primary aim to gather a collection of books that could be loaned out to the members of the group. The Lyceum proved to be extremely popular, probably because it was the only social outlet on campus at that time. Before long, it was so large, they couldn't all meet at once. They had to meet in 2 different houses. These two houses, of course, eventually broke into two separate groups, known as Philomathia and Philophronia. The ladies, meanwhile, formed their own literary societies, Philoletheia and Claridia. I should explain these are the dates that the pictures come from, not the dates they were founded. The ladies' societies, Philoletheia was founded in 1852, and Claridia came along in 1871. Over the years, these groups developed into more than just book clubs. They held debates. They delivered papers and orations. They learned Robert's Rules of Order and conducted their meetings accordingly. Concerts were given by society choirs and orchestras. Love that photo. For many years, the school's newspapers and magazines were published by the men's societies. Dues were collected and fees were assessed for anyone caught breaking the rules. These monies all went into the building of the society libraries, into the society publishing, and into the society halls. The stained glass windows, the wood trim, all of the furniture, the pressed tin ceiling, the chandeliers, everything that you see today in the Philomathian room on the third floor of Towers was purchased by the students. The college didn't do anything but give them a space on the third floor of Towers. The transition from the literary societies to Greek life began really in 1907 with the opening of Cochrane Hall. This ladies' dormitory offered the latest in 20th century university accoutrements, including a dining hall and a kitchen in the basement level, and social rooms throughout the building for the ladies to share. This reflected the needs of the students as they were changing in the 20th century. Whereas the university was embracing these changes, the literary societies were very much still mired in the thinking of the 19th century, very formal in their ways and manners. It got to the point where many students wanted to be members of the group, but they were more interested in the after-meeting, what they called feeds and bull sessions, held either in the Cochrane Hall Society or the Cochrane Hall social rooms, or in the various lodgings of the male students off campus. In early 1908, 3 small groups of men from the literary societies decided to semi-formally organize themselves into fraternities. In alphabetical order, they were Alpha Beta Sigma, Pi Beta Sigma, and Pi Kappa Phi. I list them alphabetically here because, quite honestly, there is no way of knowing who came first. Unless we come up with some sort of unimpeachable document from 1908 that gives a founding date for one or more of these groups, we will honestly never know. That's my professional opinion. My personal opinion is whichever of these, well, the existing 2 groups comes forward with the most money for the new archival wing of the library will get the distinction of the fraternity. See me afterward. 2 years later, in 1910, Sigma Alpha Tau was founded by one of those social room groups in Cochrane Hall. We're very lucky. This is a 1913 photo that has several of the founders of OWLs. We don't have this for most of the groups that predate the 1922 date. More on that later. In 1912, another group of Cochrane Hall ladies organized as Eta Beta Pi. Now, that same year, the Otterbein Review published the following editorial, which you see here. We have noticed numerous items in our exchanges, the exchanges being the correspondence between universities that was published in these journals. We have noticed numerous items in our exchanges stating that efforts were being made to start fraternities at Otterbein. Undoubtedly, the writers of these articles have been misinformed, as no such arrangement has come to our notice. Now, it's impossible to know whether the editor was just providing cover for himself and his friends, or if they genuinely believed that. But regardless, the student body as a whole really didn't seem to have a problem with these secret fraternities. In 1914, another group of ladies organized as Tau Epsilon Mu. And in 1915, Delta Beta Kappa fraternity was established. The faculty and administration discovered the existence of Tau Epsilon Mu and ordered it to disband. According to legend, they buried their charter on the banks of Alum Creek, probably due to the influence of the poetry of Hawthorne. No archaeological evidence, unfortunately, exists to back up this claim. The following year, in 1916, the Board of Trustees passed the following resolution, quote, "College fraternities and college secret organizations have been discounted at all times because they interfere with the fullest development of the democratic ideal of the university." A little down the page, they go on to say, "Resolved that the Board of Trustees renews its adherence to the honored policy of the college to encourage the broadest democratic spirit among its faculty and students, and instructs the faculty under no circumstances to give recognition to any organization that would in any way seem to interfere with this principle." Of course, that changed nothing. In 1917, the year that Otterbein University became Otterbein College, Epsilon Kappa Tau and Rho Kappa Delta sororities were established. In 1918, Delta Sigma Phi fraternity was established. And Tau Epsilon Mu, gone for 3 years, was brought back from its watery grave. Presumably, these were not well-kept secrets, because in 1919, the Board of Trustees added this language to the earlier resolution, quote, "The violation of this rule by any student shall be cause for immediate dismissal, and that the president and faculty be charged with the strictest enforcement of this rule," unquote. Some, such as then President Walter G. Clippinger and former president and longtime faculty Latin professor Dr. George Scott, were quite happy to enforce this rule. They were not in favor of these fraternities and sororities. Younger faculty, however, such as foreign language and history professor A.P. Rosselot, felt that the resolution was too extreme. For many years, he had been working quietly to promote the notion that social clubs, not fraternities and sororities, but social clubs, would be beneficial to the students and therefore to the university. Professor Rosselot was a graduate of the university, so he had a better idea of the Otterbein student life than most of the faculty. And I absolutely love this photo because how often have you seen a boxing match at Otterbein lately? For those of you who are unsure, this is Professor Rosselot as a student in his Block O sweater. On April the 4th, 1921, Otterbein faculty came up with what they thought would be the final solution to the problem of fraternities and sororities on campus. It was a twofold plan, it started with the passage of these 3 resolutions. 1, that any student belonging to any group or organization not authorized by the faculty be dismissed from the college. 2, that organizations be given until 4 o'clock, April 11th, for the dissolution and for adjustment of their affairs. 3, that a complete, frank, and unimpassioned statement of the situation be made to the entire student body. In other words, it was disband or be expelled and make a public confession of your sins. This, I believe, was to wipe the slate clean, not so much for the students, but for the sake of the administration and the Board of Trustees, because a mere 2 months later, the faculty, with much student input, passed the following resolution. Quote, "Any group of students desiring to associate themselves together for literary, social, scientific, religious, or other legitimate purposes may be permitted to do so, provided that each group secure the permission of the faculty for its organization, and that a member of the faculty be chosen as a sponsor." So in the fall of 1921, 12 clubs were officially recognized by the college. In the order that they appeared in the 1922 Civil, they were the Annex Club, one for all and all for one. The Alps Club, all or nothing, roughly translated. The Cookhouse, to help others with a brotherly feeling. Now, no giggling, this was 100 years ago. Country Club, staunch friends at all hazards. Sphinx, truth to us above all. Lakota, never content with less than the best. Greenwich. I think that's something along the lines of our minds for both work and play. That's literally from Italian through Google. The Arbutus Club, love and honor. Tomodachi, to thine own self be true. The Owls Club, sagacity, affection, and truth. Polygon, while we live, let us live. Onyx, sisters and friends until the end. Surprisingly, not listed in that yearbook, but very much active, was the Talisman Club. Is it true? Is it needful? Is it kind? Obviously, these were the existing fraternities and sororities, now publicly reborn and completely separate by decree from all of the trappings of Greek life. The trustees were happy. As far as they were concerned, the matter was over. The students were happy. Greek life by any other name. The students, I suspect the faculty and administration were also happy because, well, we're done with this. We can move on with our lives. The matter was settled. New clubs, of course, continued to form. In 1922, 3 new groups were recognized. Jonda, let brotherly love continue. Arcady, thoughtful each of all. Phoenix, I have no idea what this means, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. In 1924, Lotus Club came along. Their motto roughly translates as true friendship. And in 1925, the Philota Club was formed. We don't actually know their quote. This is the red-green motto. Thank you. No one knows exactly why it happened when it did, but throughout the 1927-28 school year, terms generally associated with Greek life started to appear both in the publications of the school and, as the Germans say, in the zeitgeist surrounding the university. Things like pledging, initiations, and rushing parties began to appear. And in the 1928 Sybil, all pretense was dropped, and instead of calling them social clubs for the first time, they were fraternities and sororities named by their Greek letters. The faculty did not take kindly to this and were quick to remind the students that for all official purposes, there was no Greek life on campus. However, the faculty were not blind. The genie was out of the bottle, and the situation had to be dealt with. 2 years later, in 1930, a study was commissioned by the president of the Board of Trustees, Frank O. Clements. I'm sure all of you recognize that name from the multitude of Clements buildings throughout the campus. He instigated this commission, this study, to figure out the effects these organizations would have on the college. He said, quote, "Let me suggest that character building be your yardstick. We want a product keen mentally, with sound bodies and hearts on fire with high purpose, capable of making this world a better place in which to live. Do social groups help or hinder? Do they put too heavy a financial burden on our young people? Do they interfere with school spirit and awaken minor loyalties? Such are some of the questions you will need to face in your inquiry," unquote. Well, the committee worked for 2 years on the question, and what they found was that the students involved in Greek life had the same high moral character and religious inclination as the rest of the student body. As the rest of the student body. On January 18th, 1932, the faculty officially approved Otterbein's fraternities and sororities. Thank you. The 1930s were lean years for Otterbein. As the Great Depression took effect in the quiet, peaceful village, the number of students diminished. Most of the fraternities and sororities weathered this storm intact. Some found the only way to survive was to join the fraternities together. Delta Beta Kappa, the Cookhouse, and Lambda Kappa Tau, Lakota, merged in 1931 to form Zeta Phi. Pi Kappa Phi was actually approached to be part of this merger, but they decided to go it by themselves. Zeta Phi's motto, fittingly, was Union of Purpose. In 1933, Alpha Beta Sigma fraternity was absorbed by the former Delta Sigma Phi, which as of 1930 had become Sigma Delta Phi. Not all of the Greeks survived. In 1932, Theta Phi and Eta Beta Pi sororities and Phi Lambda Delta fraternity disbanded. The following year, 1933, we lost Phi Theta Pi, and later in 1938, Tau Delta disbanded, although I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying they came back. As Otterbein entered the 1940s, student enrollment began to improve, and with it the available number of possible Greeks. Accounts of the time tell us that the fraternities were especially competitive. When surveyed, the freshmen said they were heavily recruited even before they started their classes. Of course, that doesn't go on today. No, certainly not. This period of growth was cut short for the fraternities on December 7th, 1941, with the attack on Pearl Harbor and the onset of World War II. Only 4 fraternities were able to remain active, and those with greatly reduced numbers. Sigma Delta Phi disbanded in 1943 when every member of the fraternity enlisted. Pi Beta Sigma never lost all of its members at once, but at one point during the war years, every single member of the fraternity either volunteered or was drafted into service. Sororities flourished during the war years as the women of the college stepped up to accept the roles and responsibilities left open by the men who had left. Membership grew so much that there were enough women to revive Tau Delta in 1943. The war officially ended in 1945, but the first wave of veterans didn't really hit until the spring of 1946. This immediately brought Sigma Delta Phi back into existence and set the stage for remarkable growth for both Greeks and Otterbein as a whole. Enough men returned to Otterbein after World War II to fill the fraternities full to the bursting point. Out of this came the last of the native Otterbein fraternities. Lambda Gamma Epsilon, founded in 1948. Since this frat was organized by a group of men who worked in the King Hall dining facility, they took Kings as their nickname. Their motto was very reflective of the time: loyalty to God, country, brothers, and Otterbein. There was also a bit of turbulence in this period. Due to dwindling numbers, Rho Kappa Delta disbanded for 10 years, from 1951 to 61, and for reasons lost to history, Sigma Delta Phi did likewise for 8 years, from 1954 to 1962. Despite this early turbulence through the 50s and 60s, the fraternities and sororities really were the dominant force at Otterbein. The fraternities hosted campus events like hay rides and pig roasts. Eta Phi Mu brought entertainment to campus, including Woody Herman's Third Herd in 1954. Meanwhile, the sororities became active in charitable causes, creating scholarships, raising money for the Methodist Children's Home, volunteering at area nursing homes, and other similar activities. In the late 1960s, Theta Nu gathered clothes and toiletries to send to soldiers in Vietnam. In 1965, the Dean of Students, Marion Chase, put together a report on the Greek system at Otterbein College. It recommended that the fraternities and sororities should be allowed to follow a diverse program of service, social amenities, and scholarship. I mention this not because this is any great news. As you can see, fraternities and sororities were already well on their way to doing that, but at one time in this report it was proposed that the college build a fraternity row north of the athletic field where the big parking lots are today. As you can imagine, that did not happen. Most importantly, in this era, in 1971, a mere 61 years after the first sorority was organized, the Board of Trustees voted in favor of allowing the sororities to have their own houses. The turbulence of the 1960s really didn't hit Otterbein until the early 70s. Once again, a poor economy combined with the changing needs of the typical college undergrad led to a decrease in the number of students and therefore the prominence of the Greeks here at Otterbein. Rho Kappa Delta seemed to suffer the most. I'm sure many of you have been scratching your head saying, who the heck are they? Well, that's because they haven't been around since the early 80s. As you can see, they had to disband once again in 74. They came back in 79, lasted until 1980, and then disbanded for the final time. My hope is that eventually we will have enough people interested in Greek life to bring them back before all of the alumni get too old. Tau Delta had similar misfortunes. They disbanded in '78, reformed in 1980, and disbanded again in 1981. Luckily, however, they reformed in 1988 and have been going active ever since. Skipped a page, my apologies. As for the fraternities, Zeta Phi disbanded in 1980, but was revived in 1983. I didn't have a good Zeta Phi picture for that era, so I put this one up from about 1948. I put that one up because the gentleman in the corner there smiling at the camera was my grandfather's best friend, John Canfield. Class of either 48 or 50, I can't quite remember. In 1982, Lambda Gamma Epsilon closed down, but they quickly returned 2 years later in 1984. I again didn't have a good shot, so here is a hayride from approximately 1964. From 1908 until 1980, the fraternities and sororities at Otterbein had all been native to our university. There were no nationals. There may have been attempts to bring them, but they didn't take until 1981, when Alpha Sigma Phi was given a colony here at the university. Their motto was, "The cause is hidden, the results well known." They only lasted 3 years and disbanded in 1984. In 1989, a second attempt to bring a national fraternity took root. Alpha Tau Omega, nicknamed ATO, was officially chartered in 1990. Operated on campus until 1997, when unfortunately their charter was revoked due to some alcohol-related incidents. No subsequent attempt to revive them has been made. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Otterbein Greeks were heavily involved in charitable work and service projects, a trend that continues to this present day. For example, Theta Nu made badges for the American Red Cross. Sigma Delta Phi organized a walk for life to benefit the American Cancer Society. Country Club adopted the village of Westerville Retirement Home. Epsilon Kappa Tau participated in the American Cancer Society's Making Strides Against Breast Cancer and the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure. Kappa Phi Omega conducted a blanket drive for the homeless. Sigma Alpha Tau and Eta Phi Mu raised money for the Bill Wyatt Lung Foundation through a 4-mile walkathon. The list goes on and on. Sadly, we couldn't find any good pictures of them, so this is a Kappa Phi Omega car wash fundraiser circa 1997. That's my good friend Sarah Marie, also known as Smee. Unfortunately, we ended the 20th century on a sad note. In 1999, Sigma Delta Phi disbanded due to a diminished number of members. This is not a photograph of that. This is a photo of their old house. They used to stand next to the Theta Nu house, which is still very fondly remembered by the older alumni. Greek life at Otterbein has been strong in the 21st century. Sphinx came back in 2001, as did the National Fraternity Alpha Sigma Phi. In 2011, an interest group of Phi Delta Theta National Fraternity received its colonization charter, and in March 2013, they were officially recognized by the Otterbein Interfraternity Council with full privileges in Rushing and Greek Week. And that brings us to today. We do not have a picture of today, so please enjoy the 1963 Greek representatives. Greek life on campus has survived because, unlike the literary societies, it has adapted and changed to meet the needs of the students throughout the 20th century and into the 21st. As long as these organizations continue to live up to the standards laid out by Frank Clements in 1930, producing, again I quote, students who are keen mentally with sound bodies and hearts on fire with high purpose, capable of making this world a better place in which to live, then there will always be fraternities and sororities at Otterbein University. That concludes my program. Are there any questions? Well then, if there are no questions, I guess I will say thank you so much for coming out today, sharing your lunch with me. If any questions do come up, please feel free to contact me. My email is on the university website. My office is downstairs in the basement. If the door is open, please feel free to stop by. And if you have any questions about your specific organization, some groups have wonderful collections, some don't have a lot. Feel free to stop by and examine what we hold. Thank you.